is a quintessential worm, small and reddish pink with faint stripes between each segment. It is a master composter, preferring a heap of rotting garbage to just about anything else. Dig around in pig slop, barnyard manure, or a mound of damp leaves, and you'll probably find red wigglers, eating and laying cocoons in the mess. But the worms themselves are not messy. This one slipped out of its pile of rubbish perfectly clean. It came out of my worm bin, a small composting operation on my back porch in which I deposit scraps from the kitchen. I don't know how many of them live in the bin, 10,000 maybe. Sometimes when I dig around in there, the worms are so thick that they look like ground beef set in motion, a mass of churning bodies. It is hard to think of them as individuals, but when it came time to pull one out of the bin and set it on my palm, I did spend a minute looking down at them, trying to choose the right one. A good sturdy specimen was working its way up the side of the bin as if it was ready for adventure. The reason I was choosing a worm to hold was that it had occurred to me that in all the years I've kept them, I'd never actually touched one. Strange that I would have such an aversion to letting one get next to my skin. How was I to learn anything about the dark and damp place where the plants in my garden put down roots if I wasn't ready to get intimate with an earthworm? With one finger, I poked at the worm in my hand. It was completely limp. I could see a purplish vein running along the length of it, just beneath the skin. I curled my palm around the worm, folding it in half and in half again. It didn't react. I began to wonder how a creature this weak could do anything, even move through dirt. Then, a few seconds later, it seemed tired of this expedition. It raised one end up, the head I suppose, and extended one segment at a time into the air. Now, finally, it moved and left a little slime in my palm. I shuddered but didn't drop it. This slime, this worm mucus, was its way of reacting to stress that I had brought on by pulling it out of its bedding and exposing it to light. The worm moved to the edge of my hand, and this time pointed its head down towards the bin, towards home. It was intent on getting back. Just then it looked as if it were capable of doing something after all. It moved with purpose, seeking to escape, trying to return to its familiar habitat. I dropped it into the bin, where it ducked under a layer of damp newspaper and disappeared. I held worms quite often after that, not just from the bin, although I did get into the habit of pulling 4 or 5 out at a time and letting them wiggle through my fingers. I also started handling worms I found in the garden, particularly the enormous night crawlers, Lumbricus terrestris, that stretched the length of my hand. A night crawler, I learned, would press its tail against my wrist as if it was seeking traction, then point its head out beyond the end of my middle finger. On a rainy day, I might handle a half-dozen night crawlers like this. It is both fascinating and a little disturbing to pull something out of the ground and stare at it, something that does not belong up here with the rest of us. When I stand over a patch of earth and wonder about the subterranean activity taking place underfoot, I am not alone. Gardeners are inquisitive by nature. We are explorers. We like to turn over a log or pull up a plant by the roots to see what's there. Most of the gardeners I know are, like me, quite interested in earthworms, in the work they do, churning the earth, making new dirt. We hold soil in our hands, squeeze it and smell it as if we are checking a ripe melon, and we sift through it to see what inhabits it. Ask a gardener about the earthworm population in her garden, and I guarantee she will have something to say on the subject. It seems strange, then, that most scientists before Charles Darwin didn't consider worms worthy of study. Very little was known about them in the 19th century, when Darwin emerged as a sort of champion of worms, devoting his last book to a painstakingly detailed research of their physiology and behavior. The Formation of Vegetable Mold Through the Action of Worms, with Observations on Their Habits, was published in 1881. He was an old man when he wrote the book, but the subject had interested him for decades. How could such an insignificant creature capture the attention of a distinguished scientist like Darwin?